My sister gave birth, so I went to the hospital. But as I walked down the hallway, I heard my husband's voice. She has no clue. At least she's a good cash cow. Then my mother spoke. You two deserve happiness. She's just a useless failure. My sister laughed. Thanks, I'll make sure we're happy. I said nothing and turned around. But what happened next shocked them all. Melissa Johnson sat at her desk, staring at the fertility clinic bills spread across her planner. Not even the skyline view from the Chicago high-rise could brighten her mood today. Here we go again, she whispered, pressing a hand to her forehead with a deep sigh. As a fashion buyer, Melissa was always expected to be perfect. Her eyes naturally drifted to the wedding photo on her desk, capturing a frozen moment of smiles with her husband Brian. After 5 years of marriage, their fertility struggles had begun to create an invisible wall between them. Brian worked at a local real estate company, always impeccably dressed with a charming smile. Lately though, his smile couldn't hide his exhaustion. The fertility treatment costs have gone up again, Melissa told Brian across the dinner table that evening. More of it isn't covered by insurance now. Brian set down his chopsticks and reached for the red wine. It's okay, we'll manage, he said, tilting his glass. Work is going well. Melissa looked into her husband's eyes. She sensed he was hiding something. Really? The joint account balance seems to be decreasing lately. Just business expenses, Brian answered quickly. I need to make some upfront investments to close big deals. Don't worry about it. Melissa was about to press further when the phone rang. Her sister Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. Hey, can you talk right now? Vanessa's voice trembled with excitement. What's going on? Melissa interrupted her conversation with her husband and moved to the kitchen. You might not believe this, but I'm pregnant. Melissa was speechless. She leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to steady her breathing. Oh, congratulations, she managed to say. Who's the about that? I can't say right now. For personal reasons. Vanessa lowered her tone slightly. Vanessa was Melissa's polar opposite. She had no steady job, relied on their parents' financial support, and lived a carefree life. While Melissa had always tried to meet their parents' expectations out of a sense of responsibility, Vanessa had escaped that pressure and walked a completely different path. Have you told Mom and Dad? Melissa asked, maintaining her composure. Yes, I just called them. They were surprisingly happy, especially Mom. Various thoughts raced through Melissa's mind. Here she was continuing expensive fertility treatments, while her sister so casually announced a pregnancy. And the strange feeling that her father Walter and mother Elaine were blessing this pregnancy with an unknown father without questioning it. We're having a small celebration at Mom and Dad's on Saturday. You and Brian should come, Vanessa said cheerfully. Yes, of course, Melissa replied, though only for appearances. After hanging up, she sank to the cold kitchen floor. For years, she had tracked ovulation days, taken hormone injections, and maintained a scheduled relationship with Brian. And her sister, got pregnant without any effort, wouldn't even reveal the father's identity, and was being congratulated. Saturday's celebration at her parents' home felt like torture for Melissa. Mother Elaine placed her hands on Vanessa's stomach, saying tearfully, Our first grandchild. Father Walter smiled with unexpected gentleness, quite unlike his usual strictness. I wonder if Mom and Dad would be this happy when I get pregnant, Melissa thought bitterly. Brian sat beside her but seemed restless. He frequently checked his smartphone and stepped out several times. It's work, he explained, but Melissa had a strange feeling. That night, after returning home, Melissa opened their online banking for the joint account. The balance had decreased again. Brian's business expenses seemed too frequent and too large. His coming home time was getting later and later, with excuses about dinner with clients or important meetings multiplying. Melissa closed the screen and gazed at the night view outside her window. Various questions swirled in her mind. Why was Brian so restless? Why were her parents celebrating Vanessa's pregnancy so enthusiastically? And why did she feel further from happiness the harder she tried? The phone rang in the middle of one night. Vanessa has gone into labor and been admitted to the hospital. Her mother Elaine's voice was filled with excitement and joy. It's Chicago Memorial Hospital. We're on our way there now. Melissa rubbed her eyes and looked at the clock. 2:37 a.m. Brian's pillow was empty. Where's Brian? She asked abruptly. I don't know. Her mother's voice seemed to hesitate for a moment, probably working late. Anyway, can you come to the hospital in the morning? Yes, of course, Melissa answered. After hanging up, she got out of bed and headed to the living room. The house was silent. There were no messages from Brian, and his coat still hung on the hook. Another emergency at work, Melissa muttered to herself as she made tea in the kitchen. For months now, her husband's return time had become unpredictable. She had questioned him repeatedly, but Brian only explained it as preparations for a big contract. At 6 a.m., Melissa woke up. She must have fallen asleep on the sofa. Brian still hadn't returned home. She showered and prepared to go to the hospital, suppressing the anxiety and doubt spreading in her chest. In the Chicago Memorial Hospital parking lot, Melissa spotted a familiar car. Brian's black sedan. He's here. She frowned. There had been no contact from him last night. After getting directions at reception, Melissa headed to the maternity ward. The pale green walls and the smell of disinfectant made her anxious, reminding her of countless visits to the fertility clinic. As she walked down the hallway checking room numbers, Melissa stopped just before turning a corner. She heard a familiar voice. It was Brian's. She has no idea. At least she's a good cash cow. Melissa felt her blood freeze. She pressed against the wall, holding her breath. You two should be happy together. She's just a useless failure. It was her mother's voice. Melissa's heart began to race. Was she referring to her? Thank you. I'll make sure we are happy. Vanessa's voice, filled with laughter, triumphant. Melissa shook her head, her back still against the wall. Was this a dream? A cruel joke. Her legs began to tremble, and she struggled to support her own weight. The baby really looks like Brian, her mother's voice continued. That nose and chin, there's no mistaking it. We don't need a DNA test, came Brian's voice. The baby is definitely mine. A sharp pain shot through Melissa's chest. In her mind, all the pieces started falling into place. Brian's late homecomings, the mysterious withdrawals from their joint account, her sister's pregnancy with an unnamed father, her parents' unusual joy. Everything connected to one horrifying truth. The conversation in the room continued. How do you plan to explain this to Melissa? Her mother asked. She doesn't need to know anything. Vanessa's voice was cold. If she found out that her fertility treatment money was actually paying for my delivery expenses, she'd go crazy. Brian's laughter followed. She hasn't noticed. I've been withdrawing bit by bit from our joint account to prepare for your delivery. She's only interested in her work, so she doesn't even pay attention. But what if she finds out? Vanessa asked. She won't. Her mother's voice resonated strongly. That girl is always focused on work. Family comes second to her. That's why we decided to create a real family. Brian and you, and the baby. This is our new family. Melissa took out her smartphone. With trembling fingers, she started the recording app. She needed evidence. She felt as if her heartbeat was echoing throughout the hallway. In the end, she can't have children, her mother's voice continued. Years of fertility treatments with no results. I wanted a grandchild to carry on the family name. Brian has wonderful genes. A child from you and Brian is a gift Melissa could never give. When I started my relationship with Brian, I never thought it would come to this, Vanessa said. But now I'm glad. I've got what Melissa can't have. She has a different life. Brian's voice was cold. Success in the fashion world, winning awards. But what I wanted was a family. She couldn't give me that. Melissa's vision began to blur. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Everything she knew about her life seemed to be crumbling before her eyes. What are you going to name the baby? Her mother asked. Elaine, Vanessa answered. I'm naming her after you, Mom. Oh, how wonderful. Her mother's voice trembled with emotion. You're my true daughter. Unlike Melissa, you understand the value of family. Melissa quietly stood up. Enough. She silently stopped the recording app and slipped her smartphone into her pocket. Her footing was still unsteady, but she had made her decision. Without saying a word, she turned and began walking back the way she had come. In her mind, various emotions were swirling. Betrayal, anger, sadness, and a sense of liberation. The questions and anxieties of years had finally found answers. They weren't the answers she had wanted, but at least they were the truth. As she left the hospital, Melissa walked to her car. The sun peeked out from between the clouds, casting warm light on her face. She got into her car and rested her forehead on the steering wheel. But no tears came. Instead, something new began to sprout in her heart. A plan for revenge started to take shape in Melissa's mind. At that moment, her phone rang. Her father Walter's name appeared on the screen. Melissa, where are you? We're all waiting for you. Vanessa had her baby. It's a girl. I'm sorry, Dad, Melissa answered calmly. Something urgent came up at work. I don't think I can make it today. What? Her father's voice mixed surprise and anger. At such an important family moment? Is work more important than family? Yes, Dad, Melissa smiled. Sometimes work is more important than family. Especially when family isn't really family. What are you saying? Melissa hung up. She started the engine and adjusted the rearview mirror. Her reflection looked stronger and more determined than she had ever seen before. The Chicago sunset streamed through the windows of Melissa's apartment. She quietly sipped her coffee while looking at the documents spread across her living room table. Bank statements, credit card bills, and receipts from the fertility clinic. They were like fragments of her life. Now they lay before her as evidence of a bitter truth. Having returned directly home from the hospital, Melissa began gathering important documents from around the house. She acted without being swayed by emotion, methodically, as if handling a major project in the fashion industry. I need to organize the facts, she told herself. Based on facts, not emotions. She played back the recorded conversation, making notes of important points. Brian and her sister's affair. Her mother's conspiracy. Misuse of funds from the joint account. And the cruel fact that her fertility treatment money had actually been used for her sister's delivery expenses. Melissa's smartphone rang. It was a message from Brian, working late, might not make it home tonight. Love you. Melissa gave a cold smile. Taking care of your daughter and wife at the hospital, I see, she muttered to herself. After replying with a brief understood, she scrolled through her contact list and stopped at a name. Laura Carter. A law school classmate who now specialized in family law. Laura? It's Melissa, she said over the phone. I have an urgent matter to discuss. Could we meet today if possible? An hour later, Laura was knocking on the door of Melissa's apartment. She listened to the evidence Melissa presented, heard the recording, and checked the bank statements. This is terrible, Laura frowned. Legally, you're in a very strong position. Not only infidelity but also misuse of joint property. Furthermore, this could potentially be considered intentional fraud. What should I do? Melissa asked calmly. First, secure all evidence. Next, you should open a separate bank account in your name, Laura answered in a professional tone. Then, continue investigating in detail without them noticing. We need to uncover everything they've been hiding from you in this conspiracy. Melissa nodded. How long will it take? It will take 1 to 2 months until we're ready, Laura answered honestly. During that time you need to behave as usual. They mustn't suspect anything. A light of determination shone in Melissa's eyes. I can do it. I'll just pretend to be an actress. The next morning Melissa woke up at her usual time. Brian still hadn't returned home. She prepared for work and stopped by the bank to open a new account in her name. At work she focused and completed her tasks more efficiently than ever. Her colleagues didn't notice any change. No one could see the flame of anger burning inside her. In the evening she received a call from Brian. I'm coming home tonight, he said. We need to talk. About what? Melissa feigned composure. Vanessa had her baby. Did you know? It's a girl. Yes, I heard from Dad. Melissa answered. Congratulations. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Are you saying that to me? No, to my sister. I have nothing to say to you. Melissa deliberately kept her meaning ambiguous. Right. Could you prepare a special dinner tonight? Like a celebration? Of course, Melissa answered. Looking forward to it. After hanging up, she took a deep breath. This is the beginning, she said quietly. That night, Melissa prepared Brian's favorite dishes, opened wine, and lit candles. When he came home, she greeted him with a smile. Welcome home, she said. Congratulations on becoming an uncle. Brian looked relieved. Yes, thanks. Vanessa's baby is cute. Her name is Elaine. Same as your mother. How nice. Melissa maintained her smile. Come, dinner is ready. During the meal, she asked him questions. About his work, about the big deals he mentioned, and about his plans for the future. He answered everything, occasionally appearing tense, but seemed reassured by her attitude. About the fertility treatments, Melissa suddenly brought up. I think I want to try a little longer. Brian froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. Really? Isn't it enough? More money. Are you worried about money? Melissa asked quietly. No, that's not it. I'm just worried about your body, Brian made an excuse. All those injections, hormone therapy. Don't worry. Melissa placed her hand over his. I'm strong. Her fingertips were cold, but he didn't notice. The following week, Melissa began a thorough investigation. During her lunch breaks at work, she went to the bank and retrieved statements from the past 3 years. At night, she secretly examined Brian's documents and checked his computer. She searched for hidden assets and tracked all financial transactions between Brian, her mother, and Vanessa. It's worse than I imagined, Melissa reported to Laura one day. For the past 18 months, he's been withdrawing thousands of dollars every month from our joint account. That money was put into another account, and much of it was used for Vanessa's apartment rent, her luxury shopping, and delivery-related expenses. Evidence? I have it all. Melissa indicated the file. Bank records, photos, and recordings of their conversations. I also found evidence that Mom was complicit. She was providing funds to Vanessa and Brian from her own savings, hiding it from Dad. Well done, Laura said, clearly impressed. In my experience, few clients gather evidence this thoroughly. They ruined my life, Melissa answered quietly. I just did what was necessary. Laura placed a hand on her shoulder. We're almost ready. All that's left is to find a new place to live and proceed with the separation, Melissa nodded. She had already found a new apartment and just needed to sign the contract. Everything was prepared for her to take a step toward a new life. The weekend Brian was scheduled to go on a business trip, Melissa took action. She moved important documents, personal belongings, and mementos to her new apartment. She withdrew her share from the joint account and worked with her lawyer to prepare for the divorce proceedings. Maybe I should at least talk to Dad, she thought. Walter was a strict father, but he was always fair and valued honesty. Melissa wasn't sure if he knew about his wife's, Vanessa's, and Brian's betrayal. Melissa called her father. Dad, I need to talk to you, she said. It's personal. Can you keep it from Mom? What's wrong? Walter's voice was mixed with concern. Can we meet at a cafe tomorrow morning while Mom is at church? The next morning, Father Walter was waiting for Melissa at a downtown cafe. She brought all the evidence and told him the truth in a quiet but firm tone about Brian and Vanessa's relationship, her mother's complicity, and the diversion of her fertility treatment funds. The color drained from Walter's face, his hands trembled, and his eyes burned with anger. Unbelievable. He finally managed to say, Elaine, doing this. You didn't know? Melissa asked. Of course not. Walter raised his voice. I thought I was giving funds to Vanessa from my savings to help her become independent. When I asked who the baby's father was, she just said it was a complicated situation. I never imagined Brian. The evidence is here. Melissa played the recording. After listening, Walter covered his face with his hands. I'm sorry, Melissa, he said in a low voice. As a father, I should have noticed. It's not your fault. Melissa took her father's hand. They were deceiving both of us. What do you plan to do? Walter asked. Everything is ready, Melissa answered. I'm filing for divorce and seeking proper compensation. I will legally reclaim what they took from me. After a moment of silence, Walter nodded. I'm on your side, he said. Tell me if you need anything. Melissa smiled. Thank you, Dad. Your support is enough. Just pretend you don't know for now. I want to have everything in place before they know about my preparations. Walter agreed, and they parted ways. Melissa walked with a lighter step toward her new apartment. She didn't yet fully understand that the coming events would shake her entire family to its core, but in her heart, something that had been lost for a long time was returning. I'm home, Brian's voice echoed through the apartment. Returning from his 3-day business trip, he placed his travel bag in the entryway and looked around. Melissa? There was no answer. On the living room table lay a brown envelope. His name was written on it in elegant handwriting. Brian frowned as he picked up the envelope. Inside were formal legal documents and a letter from Melissa. What is this? At that moment, the apartment door opened, and Melissa entered. She was wearing a suit with her hair neatly styled. She wore a cold expression that Brian had never seen before. Was it a good trip? Melissa asked quietly. Or did you enjoy your time with Vanessa and the baby? The color drained from Brian's face. What are you saying? Enough with the act, Melissa raised her hand to stop him. I know everything. Your relationship with Vanessa. Mom's conspiracy. And the fact that my fertility treatment money was actually being used for Vanessa's delivery expenses. Brian looked at the contents of the envelope and changed color. This is a misunderstanding, is it? Melissa took out her smartphone and played the recording. The hospital conversation echoed through the room with crystal clear quality. She has no idea. At least she's a good cash cow, Brian's voice. Followed by Elaine's and Vanessa's voices. Brian collapsed into a chair. Melissa, let me explain. Explain what? Melissa calmly asked. How you deceived me, betrayed me, used my money, had an affair with my sister, and had a child with her. What explanation could there be? Brian struggled for words. I really did love you at first. But with not being able to have children, you're blaming me? Melissa's voice trembled slightly. Infertility wasn't my choice. You promised in our marriage vows in sickness and in health. I know, Brian held his head. But Vanessa is unlike you. She's different from me, Melissa said coldly. She's the kind of person who sleeps with her sister's husband, bears his child, and feels no remorse about ruining her sister's life. Forgive me. Brian suddenly began to plead. Let's start over. It's too late. Melissa showed him the documents in her hand. The divorce proceedings have already begun. All the evidence of inappropriate withdrawals from our joint account, hiding assets, and infidelity is in place. Brian's face turned pale. You? Yes. I recorded everything and gathered evidence, Melissa explained matter-of-factly. While you were out claiming to be working, I examined bank statements and uncovered your lies one by one. But why? Brian asked, visibly shaken. Why didn't you just leave quietly? Why? Anger flashed in Melissa's eyes. You all tried to take everything from me. My husband, my family, my future, even my money. Did you think I'd just walk away? Brian was speechless. The trial starts next week, Melissa continued. Dad already knows. He plans to testify as a witness. Walter? Brian's voice trembled with fear. He too. Dad didn't know anything, Melissa said sternly. He was another victim, deceived by all of you. The phone rang. It was Brian's smartphone. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. Melissa gave a cold smile. Why don't you answer? It must be an important call. Brian ignored the phone. How can I? There's nothing you can do, Melissa said. I've packed your belongings in boxes. Leave today. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Melissa shrugged. Why don't you go to Vanessa's? You're family, aren't you? A week later, the trial began. Melissa's lawyer, Laura, presented evidence not only of infidelity but also of hidden assets and improper withdrawals from the joint. Account, recording tapes, bank statements, and numerous photographs. The judge frowned at this evidence. These are very serious allegations. Further investigation revealed in court that Mother Elaine had conspired with Brian to hide assets. Elaine was forced to take the witness stand and testify with a pale face. Why did you do this? The judge asked. Elaine stumbled over her words. Melissa was always focused on work, putting family second. I thought she shouldn't have children. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Does that justify facilitating and supporting an affair between your daughter's husband and your other daughter? The judge questioned sternly. Elaine couldn't answer. Next to her, Vanessa sat holding the baby, a look of terror on her face. In the courthouse hallway, Walter stood next to Melissa. Well done, he said quietly. It's painful to see the truth come to light, but it's necessary. Thank you, Dad, Melissa replied. Ultimately, the court recognized Melissa's claims and issued a judgment favoring her in the division of property. Additional compensation was also ordered for Brian and her mother's conspiracy to hide assets. On the day the verdict was delivered, Melissa left the courthouse with Laura. It was raining outside, but there was a strange brightness in her heart. It's over, Melissa said. No, Laura smiled. This isn't the end, it's a new beginning. A year later, Chicago was wrapped in beautiful autumn colors. From the window of her new boutique office on Maple Street, Melissa watched leaves dancing in the park. A new sign reading, Melissa Johnson Style Consulting, shone at the building's entrance. We've heard back from the new client, her assistant Jessica reported. They've signed the contract. Melissa smiled. Thank you. Over the past year, her life had changed dramatically. With the victory in the divorce case and the compensation, she established her long-dreamed-of consulting company. Her experience in the fashion industry and sharp sensibility quickly attracted attention, and the company grew steadily. The phone rang. Her father Walter's name appeared on the screen. Dad, what's up? Is dinner still on for tonight? Walter's voice was cheerful. Of course, Melissa answered. My apartment at 7. After hanging up, she returned to the window. In her mind, she reflected on the events of the past year. Brian and Vanessa's relationship didn't last long, as expected. After the trial, Brian was fired from the real estate company and had to take a lower-paying clerical job. Having lost his status and reputation, he couldn't adapt to his new life with Vanessa. There were constant arguments between them, with financial struggles and the stress of raising a baby making the situation worse. A few months ago, Melissa happened to see Vanessa at a coffee shop. Her previously confident attitude was gone, replaced by a tired expression as she tried to soothe her baby. Melissa moved to another seat without being noticed by her, but a strange feeling welled up. Not a sense of victory, but a somewhat empty feeling. Her relationship with her mother Elaine had not been mended. Elaine had repeatedly sought reconciliation, but Melissa didn't respond. Having lost social credibility, her parents were distanced by their former friends, especially her mother, who lamented not being invited to the lavish dinner parties Melissa used to host every Christmas. They brought it on themselves, Melissa thought, but deep down she sometimes felt the loneliness in the complete estrangement. Walter was different. He had separated from his wife and started living in a small apartment. His bond with Melissa grew stronger than before, and they began having dinner together once a week. Back in her office, Melissa glanced at the picture frame on her desk. It showed her smiling with a man. David Clark, her new partner. An investment advisor she met during the divorce proceedings who had also helped her launch her company. David understood her past and nurtured their relationship without rushing. Melissa had recently started adoption proceedings. She had given up on fertility treatments and made a new choice. David fully supported her decision. Meanwhile, Brian eventually couldn't afford child support and fled out of state. Vanessa ended up living with her parents with the baby. But their once affluent lifestyle never returned. In the evening, Melissa left her office. The autumn wind caressed her cheeks. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with fresh air. The pain of the past hadn't completely disappeared, but it had made her stronger. What she had lost was significant, but what she had gained was even greater. Confidence, independence, and true self-worth. She was no longer someone else's shadow but shining in her own light. Melissa looked up at the sky. The setting sun breaking through the clouds seemed to promise a new tomorrow.